Ah, the subway. You guessed it, today we're in New York City. We are dining at the Half King in Chelsea. Plenty of great beers on tap and excellent food. This place is a craft beer lover's paradise. Oh, and it has some great books. Celebrities, politicians, and war reporters like its owner, Sebastian Younger, make this place the central hangout for those looking to elevate their bar banter. Today I'm joined by Assemblyman Ron Kim from the 40th District of New York. Ron is the first and only Korean American elected in New York State.
Politicians in pubs.
That voice in your head. Some call it your conscience, your narrating voice. Some scientists call it your evolutionary algorithm. But does that voice in your head have a voice in its head? If so, are certain agents trying to tell it what to do? We will cover that and a few more techie themes on today's show, The Politics of Algorithms. So, Assemblyman, thank you for meeting us today here at the Half King.
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Michael, for inviting me to this interview.
I'm sure you're aware that in recent news, there's a company known as Cambridge Analytica that has leaked the data of now the number's up to 78 million Americans through a plugin.
Yeah.
So, long story short, they used this data to build individual profiles of users of Facebook, something they called, I believe it was called psychographic profiling. They used this kind of profiling to influence targeted ads and memes. Is this it? Is this the end of democracy and politicking as we know it? Can we prevent foreign governments and entities outside of the United States from interfering in our democracy here?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very, I think, a tough question to answer in a few minutes. I think we are just at the beginning of the damage that was done by social media giants like Facebook. We're finally getting some answers from the CEO, and there'll be more oversight hearings to come over the next few months, if not a couple of years. But one thing is for sure, that we are living in a whole different world where there's so much data out there on individual behavior, consumer behavior, and any company that have direct access to that can implement deep learning algorithms, figure out what makes us tick, what patterns can they monitor to predict how we're going to lean when it comes to elections. The private sector, by the way, has been doing this for a lot longer than elections. These ads that we see aren't generated overnight. There are billions of dollars that we spend on focus groups and monitoring our consumer behavior to figure out what kind of products that we already like. Even before we open up a social media account, they have that kind of data on us. So we're living in a very scary time where our private information is already out there. So I don't know as a legislator, as a politician, what we can do to reverse that trend anymore. I mean, it's already out there. People already have that access, and I don't want to sugarcoat, to the public that we're offering, some sort of safeguards for social media sites like Facebook that's going to make it safer, because it's not. It really is not. It's So how do we have these real conversations and really educate folks to be more enlightened, to not fall prey for group thinking, because the very, I think, foundation of why people were influenced by these bots was based on always the human basic psychology, which is predicated on group thinking. That if we see other people peer-to-peer influencing you, you're more likely to behave that way. And I think there's a lot to be learned about improving ourselves and kind of detaching ourselves and unplugging as individuals to be influenced by group thinking outlets like social media and Facebook. And that is a harder conversation and harder road to take, but I think that's the only way we can preempt from giant tech companies for influencing us in the future.
So I just recently saw a study that 70% of fake news clicks came from social media, while 10% of real news clicks, like from the Washington Post or Boston Globe, came from social media. So is it time to break up the tech giants? I mean, is this it? can we sustain this kind of system anymore, where these guys at Facebook are going to say, "Oh no, we're not a media company. We're a social media platform."
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that's cutting it anymore, especially with the recent news that has come to light.
Yeah. I think there are different ways we have to protect our freedom of press and make sure that our media and press aren't attacked the way they are right now, the legitimate ones. There aren't, unfortunately, when we give those rights to the press, we can't safeguard the fake press, the fake news from entering that space either. We, I think, as a public, just need to be better educated and have more reliance on peer-to-peer systems where we can rely on sources and make educated based decisions on what's right and what's wrong. Again, I think we're falling prey to basic weaknesses of our psychological deficits, especially at a time when the country is shifting, where we're losing jobs left and right to automation, when people in middle America are no longer going back to the jobs that used to exist. It is much easier to believe in a theory that validates oneself in that existence. In other words, it's hard for a person who just lost their job to wake up and say, you know, this is how the world is turning and I need to go back to school, I need to rethink about education. It's easier to point fingers at the neighbor or a minority or an immigrant. Those are the guys, that's the woman who took my job. I'm still good. Like I am still a good American. I am still what this country should be about. And they will. And when you want to feel secure and validated, you subconsciously try to look for outlets and news that validate that sentiment. You know, and that's what the fake news is doing. They're filling that void of our individual weakness in the way we think. So I think from ground up, top, bottom, like we need to have some tough, uncomfortable, real conversations with all Americans, not just, you know, white or black, but all Americans, immigrants, new Americans, people who've been here for 10 generations. You know, they all need to sit down and have some tough conversations that the world is changing, and instead of pointing fingers because we want to feel validated in this atmosphere, like, we need to wake up and have and realize that unless we shift with the world, we're going to get left behind and we're going to be in chaos.
Taking a much needed break, I had a Bronx Pale Ale, Super APA. For brunch, I had the French toast with a little maple syrup. Ron had the omelet with fresh greens and home fries. I gotta tell you, the food here is great, and with all the awesome beers on tap, it makes it that much better. So I'm not sure how much you know about predictive analytics, and if you want to learn more about predictive analytics, just click on the link below and there's a short video about that. But PA, or predictive analytics, is really kind of changing the way we communicate with people, and we're seeing a little bit of that now.
Yeah.
I think Cambridge Analytica touched on that a little bit,
yeah,
but it's really still in its infancy phases. So the question that I have is, do you think PA will help us target voters in a better way for us in the political realm? Do you think these advanced algorithms can be useful for good instead of, you know, a lot of the negative stuff we're seeing now coming from this new technology?
Yeah. Ultimately, I think it's going to have both positive and negative impacts. I mean, imagine if you have a supercomputer that can profile you, your age, your race, your gender, your background, and run an algorithm based on someone like you who already existed and how they voted and how they bought stuff, and they have a profile of what kind of words, if they use against a person like you would behave in a certain way. One human being can't possibly do that algorithm, but when you put in predictive analytics, AI, deep learning, all these tools behind it, now you can create a 98% predictive. If you use the word, you know, Guinness and
Which
you
we
know,
will be using today.
right, or scrambled eggs. You're most likely going to say yes, whatever I ask next. They can come up with that kind of formula, and that's scary, right? That is because that kind of technology can be used for something positive, but it also can be manipulated. And I think we're just seeing, like you said, we're at the infancy stage of this. When you view places like China, they have more data, they have more consolidated data under just one company owned by the state, more so than we can even imagine, because they have so many more people and data to compare. They're sitting on, I think, even more of a dangerous technology right now, and I don't know which direction they're going to go with this, but I would urge places like China and the future companies that are going into the space to use it for positive, use it for good. For example, the way that we redistribute wealth in our world, in this country, the way that we give out loans and money in banks is based on an outdated formula, just based on person's credit history, credit score. It has no indication of whether you will be a successful small business owner or not. It doesn't say anything about your character, your friends, and how people view you outside of this space. We have that data. We have those analytics. We just mentioned it. Why not use some of that data to empower our banks and our investment banks to better redistribute, better invest in people who can actually perform? Instead of sidelining them with credit history, because oftentimes when you use credit score and credit history, women and minorities are often redlined. So I think there are ways to go forward in a positive way, but oftentimes people, when you see data, people who have access to money will buy that data to exploit it, to influence others and control the mass. And unless we ourselves wake up as the public and the mass and put an end to it, we will continue to go the negative way.
The scariest part of PA to me is how the parties, the Democratic and the Republican Party, are using it to help them really tailor and juryman districts to the party agenda and the party line.
Yeah.
I know there's a matter before the courts now regarding, and some of the federal judges have had different opinions on this case.
Yeah.
How could states fight against this? Because at the end of the day, I know gerrymandering is a big thing, and I think it is a matter for the courts, but who knows where that's going. But the parties are going to serve themselves. Like, why would you gerrymander a district to be even? If you're Ron Kim and there's a high Asian population in your district, why are you going to gerrymander your district to be more fair when it actually hurts you at the polls?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that speaks to a lot of political decisions, not only with gerrymandering, but any other big ticket items where when you empower just a couple of individuals from, it doesn't matter which party, to make these unilateral decisions, they're only going to serve to protect their own interests, not the public. So we need to figure out a way to decentralize that power, to give more voice to people who are advocating for the people on the ground, the communities. And that is the only way we can have a truly checks and balance system, including not only with gerrymandering, but in the way that we allocate funding, the way that we control our schools, our healthcare. It should not be politicized in a way where it's controlled by only a handful of people. And that's what we see in New York, that's what we see in big states. And it is a matter of fixing the actual structure behind the system. And that also takes a lot of reform to get to that point. Because in other words, if you are asking someone who's already in power to do something where they may actually undermine their own power, why would they, right? So like ethics reform or taking away let's say, like outside income for, let's say, a member of this a speaker who is a partner at a big law firm that's making $500,000 a year on outside income. Now you know that that's not right, and we should figure out a balance to limit some of that outside income. But why would the most powerful person in the state would do something to undermine their own power and their income, right? So I think that is the reality that we live in, and unless we figure out a way to counterbalance that by institutionally changing the system to empower the people, we're going to see the same repeated patterns for the next few years.
And disclaimer, I don't know if Ron Kim's district is gerrymandered. I just was using that as an example.
Sure.
Probably not. I really want to talk about your bit license legislation that you have now in Albany. I feel like a lot of the topics we covered today in some way are related to cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin in particular.
Sure.
So can you just tell us why you drafted this legislation?
You know, the world has been focused on some form of cryptocurrency for the last few years, and New York being the capital, the financial capital of the world, we should be taking a leadership role in properly regulating and offering a long-term solution to this space. There's a lot of institutional folks that want to get behind it for the right reasons. But instead of taking the time to work with the communities, whether it's the blockchain or the crypto or the startup communities, the New York regulators, particularly one person, the superintendent of the leading agency, wrote these regs overnight 5 years ago without any legislative authority, which is now dubbed the bid license, that it is so difficult to understand and figure out, that drove out all these crypto startups and exchanges out of New York City and out of New York State. And 5 years later, there's only about 2 or 3 companies left that qualified. One particular component of this is the bond requirement, an insurance bond requirement for these startups to qualify for. It is impossible for startups, particularly if you're a minority or woman-owned or immigrant-owned enterprise, to qualify for these bond products because A, it doesn't even exist. No bond insurance knows how to underwrite for a crypto exchange. It doesn't exist. And secondly, if they wrap their head around it, they don't qualify because you need years of credit history, individual credit history, credit score to get that kind of bond requirement. So all these companies are leaving New York when on one hand, the governor is pushing forward this notion that we should be the startup center of the world and put up all these millions of dollars of startup funding, yet we're making these ridiculous regulations to drive out these companies in the back end. So my legislation is trying to get rid of the bid license and offer a long-term solution for the state of New York.
All right. So by stifling, economic growth and startups and stuff like that, do you mean like hedge funds? People that are going to start crypto hedge funds?
Yeah, there's a range of stakeholders that are interested in this space. People who are from private equity firms to people who manage family money, family funds, all the way to academics and nonprofit startup companies that are trying to dive into the space because they want to offer what they call the community-based currency. It's also called complementary currency to help local enterprises and mom-and-pop store owners thrive by offering a local community currency that people can feel proud of using. And these are some things that's been done around the world, particularly in Europe, and they're trying to bring these ideas to places like New York and in America, but we're making it impossible for them to do their business here.
That's interesting. Some stuff I certainly did not know. So with the significant expansion of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, I can't help but get the feeling that these forms of anonymous currencies are going to make their way into our political system. And it happened a little bit during the presidential campaign of 2017. What do you think about this? Are you willing to draft legislation to prevent this from happening in New York State?
Yeah.
And I'm going to need a firm commitment on that.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. No. I think just like any new technological innovations, there are ways to exploit it and use it for bad outcomes. But there's also really positive things that we can do with it. As long as we take the proper measures to safeguard these type of digital currencies to be used for wrong things, then I think we can find a good balance. The New York City, for example, New York City campaign board elections, they're already trying to write some internal memos and policies and regulations to be very transparent and clear about how and how the cryptocurrency or bitcoins can be used for campaigns, and what kind of safeguards they're going to put into place to make sure that people don't exploit the system and bypass some of the current rules. I mean, there are many things that we need more clarity on, but at the core of the community that's driving some of these cryptocurrencies exist because they genuinely believe that the world that is currently structured, the way that in our global society we view money, only the very, very wealthy and the top corporations and retail stores that we see outside are the ones profiting off the dollar and money as it stands right now. In other words, every dollar that comes in to our local districts, like the district that I represent, it gets taken out by the big retail stores. It never stays in their local economy. If there's a way to find a solution to make sure that every dollar, every money that comes into the local region stays within the local economy, that is the only way we can truly help the mom and pop small business owners, but also give the local community a sense of purpose behind money. Money used to be, when it was first created many years ago, the purpose was given and people felt pride behind that cash. But now it's such a globalized currency system that we lost sight of the intent behind what money was created for. And I think the more local we will make it, the more pride people will have behind the transactions, and the more changes we'll see around it.
All right, well, with that, thanks for joining us. It was very insightful for me to kind of pick your brain a little bit. And another day, I'm sure we'll do a show on the opioid epidemic, which is a serious problem for many in our community, both in New York and New Jersey. So, Assemblyman, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
And
it's a
we'll
pleasure.
see you around, I'm sure.
Thank you.